Tonight on Central Mass Chronicles, we have Ben White, the producer of Talk to the Commonwealth, noted immigration attorney Randy Feldman, former head of the Research Bureau, Roberta Schaefer. And we begin with Roberta talking about something that we started to get into this conversation last week, and then time ran out. So let's get back into it. We had been going around the table. We had been talking about the fact that here is the strongest group of candidates in forever. We're talking about all these issues, and you said, what? So not surprising. You were like the Connie Luke's vote of our round table here. Why did you
That's good company.
Why did you not think that, or why do you not think that some of the issues that should be talked about are being talked about? And I'm just going to ask all of you if there's some issues that you think should be discussed this election season that are not being discussed.
Okay, so with respect to the schools, I think I started to talk about a few things that have not, so far as I know, have not been discussed at all. One of them is the idea of a school for the gifted and talented, a special high school. That was voted on by the school committee a few years ago. And the current superintendent, Maureen Benienda, came in and she said, oh, well, I have another idea for this, and put it in each school and so on and so forth. I haven't heard anything about anything being added. And, you know, you would think that if you want to attract a middle class for a base in the city, that having some special programs like that would be an important asset to the school system. So there's one thing that I haven't heard anybody talk about. The other thing that now currently is, the other thing that's not being talked about is the strategic plan. That was passed 2 years ago, and it was supposed to be, start implementation. All I've seen in the paper in the last 2 years is a list of some things that they're doing, but like no results. What's the outcome? Has anything happened? And the Worcester Education Collaborative was supposed to be monitoring the implementation of the strategic plan. Haven't seen anything about that organization in all this time. But the one thing that has been mentioned, and only recently, is the idea of having district school committee members. And that would mean changing the charter. So you have to go into that, and either it's a separate item to change just that, or we start again with the charter commission, which I think at this point, if it ain't broke, and some people would claim that the school committee is broke, but are people aware of the fact that every school is supposed to have a school improvement council, and that if you have an issue as a parent, you have direct contact. You can have direct contact with your local school instead of going to the school committee, whose members can't possibly know the intricate details of all, 45 schools? Of all of them. So there are avenues of participation that apparently are not being used
Well, at least
properly.
that issue they are talking about.
No.
At least that issue they are talking about. So some of the other issues, though, I mean, there's some other issues. That last one, though, to be fair, they did bring up the other night.
School improvement council?
But the district,
the
district's one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want that.
Randy, what do you think? Is there
Okay.
anything that is not being talked about in this race that you feel is vitally important?
Yeah. In fact, this past week, I picked up this brochure from the Worcester Chamber of Commerce, who's become a real figurehead, real authority in trying to promote information, sort of like your organization used to. The Chamber of Commerce has stepped up and done a lot of the work that your organization also used to do and does still. And they have a great report that just came out on housing and economic development. And they raised some issues that I thought were fascinating, that I never really thought about, having to do with population and with disposable income and with housing of the people who live in Worcester. For instance, 70% of the people who live in Worcester, who work in Worcester, 70% of the people who work in Worcester don't live here.
Of course not.
Yeah, I thought that was absolutely fascinating. They also said only 1% of the people who live downtown work downtown. So almost nobody lives downtown. And then they said that the people who are around 30, which is most of the downtown urban development that's gone on, the average income is $50,000 or less. And I thought that shows that we have a problem in Worcester a big problem, right? And the big problem that we have in Worcester is that we don't have jobs. We haven't created enough jobs in Worcester to be able to get people who want to come and live where they work and to stay here in Worcester.
Yeah, and I think the chamber is actually still talking about that, about retention, Ben.
Yeah, and I think that my issue actually ties in with all this. So yes, the jobs, I think there are jobs there, but not the jobs that folks want. There are definitely jobs that maybe the people who we're trying to target for downtown wouldn't want to take. But I do want to talk about retention. So with the Renaissance going on, and I truly believe, I am out all the time, different events, walking around, and I see this going on. The one thing I don't see is the density. And we need that density if you want to have the true Renaissance. I think that one thing not being talked about is the retention of college students. Not only that we're educating them here in Worcester and they're leaving, having them here after they graduate, but also making sure that they're involved in the city while they're here, and not just confined to, whatever, if they're on the Hill for Holy Cross or wherever they are. You have so many college students, and Worcester is ostensibly a college town. You get them involved. We need more nightlife, not necessarily dive bars, but more things going on a street level where you can have that density, where you have folks who are going out for a night out with a spouse that are intermingling with college students. So I'd like to see the city do more, or see what we can do about creating a density downtown, not just on the weekend nights, but all the time, and creating that boutique retail and truly a walkable, vibrant downtown.
Yeah, what reason, I was just going to say, what reason is there really for somebody from Holy Cross who is 18, 19, 20 years old to come downtown?
We need
What
to create
reason is
those
there
reasons.
somebody who works in the Glass Tower to come out and walk around, or not just get in his car and go home at 5 o'clock? They've been working on that for a long time. I don't know if we've achieved that yet.
I think the problem, and identified in this study, is a really good study, is that college students generally don't have a lot of money. Now, there is Holy Cross, and those families and those students do have money, right? WPI and Clark are a mixed bag, and the rest of the colleges in Worcester, I don't consider that their students have a lot of money. So, and what do students spend money on? Drinking, right? Whether you go to the package store or whether you go to
There's
a
a
bar.
lot of bars you can get a $1 beer here in the city.
And restaurants, right? So if you just want those kind of businesses alone and you want to rely on your students, that's fine. I got the statistic wrong. The people who are around 30 and under who went to the downtown, it's $40,000 or less, right? It's not 50. And it's also that 40% of the population in Worcester is below the poverty line. So we have a monstrous problem on not having people that have enough disposable income in order to create what you're just talking about.
Is the show over?
But to be fair, very quickly, there are a lot of events that the city and different organizations put on that are either free or very low cost. I am able to, if I wanted to, in the city of Worcester at any given time, go to a fantastic event, cultural, music, art, and have a great time for very cheap.
Well, they
A lot of them are on the college campuses. A lot of those
What about
events.
the Common, the 100 events on the Common?
They did
and-
do that a couple of years ago. They do talk now, too, about Katie Kroc. Her properties, her apartments or whatever, the Kroc family has now got, 50 more apartments that have been done. You've got where the old courthouse was that's supposed to come online. So we are going to have more people, to your density point, who are going to be moving downtown. I'm kind of back to where are they going to work, though? So our bedroom, I can remember a Research Bureau report that you wrote years ago about Worcester will just eventually become a bedroom community of Boston.
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing, you said that most of the people who work downtown don't live in Worcester. So has anybody ever done a survey to find out why those people are not living in Worcester? I can tell you what the answer is without the survey. If they have families, they don't want to be in Worcester because of the public schools. I mean, this is just a fact. When people begin to have a family, even if they're living in Worcester, then they start to think about the suburbs. And so that's one issue. And the second thing is, to your point about retaining students, from the colleges. This is something that the Research Bureau identified, back in, I mean, it's at least 15 more years
Been
ago.
talked about forever.
Yeah, and I think that we're doing a little bit better, but there has to be some concerted effort. And I think that the whole notion of internships, that have, if they're, good internships of, where the kids are actually learning something, of being, in the city, and a lot of things about, you hear about a lot of students now actually staying and putting down roots, at least for a while.
Well, you
not
need
as
med
many
jobs and tech jobs, and
Right.
to your job
well,
point.
Well, yes. I mean, and yeah, these are good jobs for college students. There are a lot of jobs, from what I'm reading, I mean, nationwide, for which students are not prepared.
Well,
When
but we have the college students, as your study 15 years ago said, we do have the college students to go into those jobs. Our problem is, and I'm not saying this is easy, I wish it was, and it's not, let's be fair to everyone, but if we could somehow recruit more people in tech, in biotech, in healthcare, if we can do, and it's not like we're not trying, we are trying.
Right.
But somehow, if there a redoubled effort somehow to recruit people who find Boston too expensive to do that work. Some of this happens naturally by market forces. We've seen the benefits. Kevin O'Sullivan, we've seen the benefits. But we need a renewed effort with like 2 people assigned, paid salary to go and recruit
To be able
these
to do
Boston
that.
business.
So
On the
now let me
campuses.
quickly just go around. So Ben, you've been to a number of these debates and watched these debates. Are these issues being talked about, or are these issues somehow being ignored? And can the City Council, the school committee, impact the issues that have been talked about right now?
I don't think they're being outright ignored, but I don't think they're being targeted in a way
Right, it's
that
not front and center.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think that they're being talked about in a peripheral way, right? There are your big name topics that you talk about, always the tax rate because that's so important. But there's a couple of these topics that every time they talk about it and you get the same answers from the same people because obviously their positions aren't changing. What they need to do is every time there's a new forum, and I guess it's too late now, but every time there's a new forum or a new debate, change up the questions, change up the topics, because there's a lot of things that affect
No,
us.
that's,
here.
that's
to ask
actually a
the
great.
committee,
It's
yeah.
actually a great point. You go to the League of Women Voters, you go to the Research Bureau, you go to
Yep.
Beers and Brews. We're all asking the same
Right,
question, as
right.
if we're the only people who are putting on a forum.
you
All right,
know-
we've got much more to come. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk more. We're not ignoring the issues here. We're going to talk more about this housing study straight ahead.
Just like in baseball, good sports reporting relies on the bullpen. There are days when our front man just doesn't have his stuff anymore.
What is he doing? This is rude.
I think it's Grafton. It could be Bartlett. It's a green and white team.
You don't have it
It's
tonight. You're done.
son of a bitch. I fucking have it. Tell me I don't.
I can still bring it.
Yes, time. All right, that's actually Bartlett versus Milbury, and it's Todd Duchesne for Milbury.
I'm just glad I can be a role guy here.
Elizabeth Warren talks about the 1%. She is the 1%. Now, if you really are so concerned about the little guy and the average guy and the middle income person, where are you? Too bad that our own Congressman, Jim McGovern, doesn't have the fortitude to stand up and speak on behalf of the people in his community. They all go to Congress with no money in their pocket, and they all leave there as millionaires. How does that happen?
Local news from Central Massachusetts for Central Massachusetts.
A new study looks at the prices of commuter rail fares in cities like Worcester.
Area schools are taking extra precautions as several communities raise the EEE threat level to critical.
Police say they are still receiving reports of drivers speeding in the same area of the crash.
Reporters in the field. And an in-depth local forecast. Worcester News tonight on Charter TV3.
All right, let's talk about that housing study, and let's go to Randy. Randy, you've read it. Actually, Ben, I know that everybody has read it, but you've read it, and you went to the forum the last Friday. What were some more of your takeaways about why this housing study is so important? And let's talk a little bit about, do we have enough market rate housing? Do we have enough affordable housing? Are we going to become too much gentrification in the city of Worcester?
Actually, I didn't go to the forum, but I was on the radio show with you, right, where we asked him questions. And after this thing, I decided I'm going to join the Chamber of Commerce. I used to be a member. I didn't find it really talking to me. And now that it gets into so much more policy stuff, now I'm going to join the Chamber of Commerce because I do find it extremely.
Taking credit for that, Tim Murray, to getting Randy Feldman in the chamber.
Right.
All right. So they came up with, there was a great great study, and they came up with some suggestions. I'm not sure that the suggestions are going to work. I have my own ideas. Like, for instance, they really put an emphasis on helping first-time home buyers, which is a great idea, but they thought that, well, the businesses should have more programs to help first-time home buyers in Worcester. And I'm thinking to myself, what do the businesses care, whether you live in Holden or Shrewsbury or Worcester? You know, I think it has to be a city thing, you know, combined with federal money and things like that. The first-time home buyer thing should be like that. Second thing they said, which is also I never heard before, pretty interesting, is that we should emphasize building with modular homes. Because modular homes, the cost of design and build is at least 10% cheaper than a regular home that's built there. And our problem in development of housing is that our costs of building housing are very similar to Boston, and the rents are about half, right? So that modular home thing, I thought that that was a really good idea.
And today, the building of modular homes is so different because you can have all kinds of designs. It's not just, you know, a trailer-looking thing at all.
And they also talked about the number of vacant properties. I was a little surprised that the vacant property thing has not ended. I thought it did end in 2008, you know, I mean, the aftermath of the collapse, but apparently that's still going on. But what I would do, like Katie Croc's building, the apartment that's mostly affordable, I went in there to look around. Unbelievably gorgeous. I mean, breathtakingly gorgeous.
And apparently sold out.
Mostly affordable, right? Yeah. The same thing is probably going to be true from the old courthouse. Breathtakingly beautiful, and at least I think half affordable or workplace together, like Katie Croc, same kind of thing. But I really, if I was the city, and they're very good at this, and so is the state, and so is the WBDC, I would give away the store if we could get Wind Development to take the old Unum building and build apartments throughout the old Unum office building, the old Prudential, I think it was Prudential Insurance Company.
No, Paul Revere.
Paul Revere Insurance Company, because now you'll have critical mass of people downtown. And whatever you got to give them for incentives, give it to them so that we can do that.
Wynn can't do more than one, but I think Wynn right now is just trying to get that old Boys and Girls Club right there on Lincoln Square, get that project up off the ground as well. But they, you know, they were sort of the outliers, that project in Lincoln Square, where they have those apartments that were some affordable, some market, you know, the lofts. I mean, that's sort of what is now seems to be what these other you know, developers are following.
I think that the city also needs to work with the suburbs, because the suburban, you know, each community has its own zoning regulations. And this is a serious problem, because in our surrounding communities, many of them have a minimum of 2-acre zoning for a house. And the result of that is, of course, you're restricting the supply. And also, the cost of that house on 2 acres has to be probably double if you just said 1 acre, a half an acre. How much land, you know, do people need? You know, I mean, that you know, having 2 acres, there's no community. You can't even see the house next to you, and it
There's
just
no density.
It's
no
and it
density.
also and also
but they don't want it.
That's right. The reason that they want this is because they don't want more kids in the schools, because it'll cost them more money, and their taxes will go up.
Speaking of that, when I raised my family in Boylston, right, and we all had a little over an acre, right, and I would have a hard day at work every day, stressed, tensed out. I would hit my button, I would open the automatic door to the garage, I would pull in, I would close it like I was going into the Batcave. Like I didn't want to see my neighbors, I didn't want to talk to anybody, I just wanted to decompress.
Isolated.
I know, but it, you know, somehow it worked.
So, Ben, the Worcester Housing Now initiative, but
yes.
and then the other part that Randy brought up that I think that nobody has been exploring as much, that I think used to be done a lot more in the city, these abandoned properties and getting people back into them, or giving people the opportunity to buy those, so somebody comes along and says, hey, I can afford that and don't mind a little hard work making it something.
Yeah, and so what I loved about the Worcester Housing Now initiative that was rolled out at Game Changers, got to give a shout out to Game Changers, fantastic event put on by the Chamber. But now there's a lot of different grants coming from different sources in partnerships with banks and other things that are giving money for issues that I think have been ignored in the past. Things like lead abatement, things like Worcester has so many 3-deckers, and as we know, those tend to be 100 years old or more, and making sure that those houses continue to be livable for the foreseeable future. The majority of Worcester's housing stock is so old that we need to bring it up into the 21st century, make sure that those are all livable conditions, make sure that not only is there housing available for the people who live here currently, but make sure there's enough housing. I think there was a number in this report that said something like Worcester is underserved by 1,900 housing units per year. So, I mean, the fact Worcester just needs way more housing. The inventory needs to drastically rise, and when that happens, prices will go down because the worry is that gentrification will happen and people will be priced out. Well, that won't happen if you have a lot of different housing units. So that's what this shows to me. We need much more housing and a much more variety of housing.
Let me tell you, that part was amazing about how underserved we are, but I also have to tell you, Ben, when I read that part, all I thought of was, my God, I can't move from 2 to 6 o'clock on 290 in downtown. And
they're all going out.
Anyway, yeah. Well, and some of them are going out. But if I'm going to add, all this housing, man, the congestion.
But they should be
is
living
be
and working in the city, so they're not going to be going in and out.
Then it won't happen. I agree. That's the goal, right?
Is that right?
Yeah. And
you live where you work.
Yeah, that's the goal. Right, and you know what? They're being smart at the state level. Apparently, Governor Baker has a zoning change that he's proposing, and with us,
to loosen it.
Because it really affects Boston.
Yeah,
I mean, the most out of any place in the state. I mean, the traffic going there, because it's so unaffordable, folks have to live outside, and then the commute becomes untenable.
Yeah, and also in Worcester, we've already made major strides, and it talked about getting rid of the parking overlay all over the place, right? And we've basically got rid of it in much of the city, and they want to extend that even further so that you don't have to. I remember Alan Fletcher, when he built his building right there on Kelly Square, he said, I just made it on the parking because they let me count some bike stations as parking, so they let me get out of the parking requirement for that reason.
You're probably not supposed to say that on TV.
Randy, in confidence, let me tell you how I did this. Sure.
But the zoning board allowed him to do it. I think it's all on the up and up.
Right.
I think so.
Yes.
And but that's the thing. Get the zoning overlay helps. The requirement of parking hurts, so that eventually we'll go to more mass transit if we get more density.
Well, you'd have to. You have to do mass transit if you want to reduce parking. If you're not going to have a robust public transit, you can't take away parking.
All right. Well, robust WRTA is a whole other show. We're going to talk about some of the density that we have right here in the city of Worcester. It was on full display Friday night into Saturday morning outside of the beer garden. Plenty of density. Hundreds out on the streets. Police weren't too happy. We'll talk about it straight ahead.
Charter TV3 and UMass Memorial Healthcare have teamed up to bring you the latest news and trends in healthcare. Health Watch, presented by UMass Memorial Healthcare, brings you the healthcare topics that are important to you. From stroke prevention to allergies, skincare to sports injury prevention, and nutrition to pregnancy, Health Watch at UMass Memorial Healthcare informs you on the issues that affect you on a daily basis. Health Watch on Charter TV3. For extended interviews with UMass Memorial Healthcare experts, log on to our website.
Hi, I'm Tim Murray. The Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce is here to work alongside you and your business by promoting economic development. We're doing this by being a strong and effective advocate for the region's businesses. At the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, we believe that a strong business community is a catalyst for a dynamic area to live and work. Join me and my guests on the Chamber Exchange on Charter TV3.
All right, so the beer garden. Where you go, and it's not exactly, Pabst Blue Ribbon for $1 a bottle. It's the beer garden. It's a very nice place. It has part of the Renaissance. It is actually something that has been touted by the city as being part of the Renaissance. Some more expensive, pricey beers, and they had a party in which they had DJs, and I know that the comment is always, this is why we can't have nice things in Worcester, but you had this party, a couple of women get into a fight, they start to close the bar down, the officer who is on duty starts to move the crowd out, he calls in some help to move the crowd out, all of a sudden you got a couple hundred people out on the street, and Ben, mayhem ensues.
And mayhem it was. So I have two major thoughts about this. Number one, people who are saying, oh, wow, so much for your Renaissance, that is patently untrue. Every major city in America, when the bars close on a weekend, will have an incident or two like this. And it's unfortunate, and I wish it didn't happen, but this sometimes happens when you have young people, alcohol, and folks
But Ben,
going out.
is this different than if it had happened down in the Canal District? This happened on Franklin Street where you're trying to build your 18-hour-a-day, spend millions on the Common.
So again, I don't think so. I don't think it's a blow to the Renaissance at all. I think that a lot of these major cities have these. It's unfortunate. But my second point is we got to throw the book at these people. You cannot. The Worcester police showed amazing restraint in not retaliating to a lot of these aggressive assaults, the grabbing of hair, pulling it out of an officer's skull, the taking of an officer's weapon, which is, I mean, the biggest no in the book, and then they enclosing them in a circle. They were vastly outnumbered, and it was just a bad scene. And I really do applaud WPD for the restraint they showed and the ability to make sure that was taken care of.
Yeah, when they took that baton, things could have escalated very quickly. As a matter of fact, I mean, you know, people say, and I read what the defense attorneys had to say the other day, you know, about the bruises on their clients and these things. But imagine if you're the police officer. One police officer said in his many years of service, less than a handful of times has he ever heard the call that went out on Friday night, which was, we need everybody. We need every available unit. We need every officer to come down to Franklin Street, which
because it was a mob.
Obviously
if you watch the video,
it's really hit the
If you watch the video, and I
point.
encourage you to go watch it, it was a mob, and they were encircling the police like it was a schoolyard fight, and they were vastly outnumbered, and this was a very aggressive, alcohol-fueled crowd.
So what's your mindset when you show up? Because the mindset, because the other thing that I have heard is the mindset the opposite way. That the mindset of this crowd and why it became so unruly was not only because their fun was being ended prematurely, but they see it's a crowd that is predisposed to not be thrilled with the police, and they see what they feel is a very rough and maybe unnecessary takedown of some people.
Okay, I basically agree with everything you said, Ben. You know, I go to the beer garden. It's right next to my office. I go there after work sometimes. I've gone there at night sometimes, especially in the summer. It's an outdoor venue. It's beautiful, and I love the beer garden.
Powwow Secret Walls was there?
Yeah, I went there for powwow.
We saw you there.
I think that was a uniquely most wonderful bar in Worcester. And there's a mix of people, of ethnicities, of ages. I think that is the greatest place to go out. But more importantly, I will continue to go there. And everybody else who goes out at night will continue to go there because we know it's not dangerous. As Ben said, there are isolated incidents that occur all over the place, all over America, and it just so happens that Mechanics Hall had a party, I think it was 94.5 in Mechanics Hall that same night, and the after party was at the beer garden, so they had even more people. They probably had more out-of-town people, right? And those whole things came together with the
A lot of people in their Halloween costumes. What do you think?
Well, I think that this is a larger issue of police and the community, which of course is going on nationwide, that the respect for police is no longer shown and that people are just attacking. And this is kind of, you know, copycat because they have these people, okay, they're under the influence, but also
I do want to point out
restraint.
real quick that I think that in those charges, if you look, you know, public intoxication was not, I don't think too many people got for drunk and disorderly. Beaten up on the cops were in those charges.
So this kind of thing, until a few years ago, never happened. If it happened, you certainly didn't read about it on the front pages. This is going on.
Don't tie this to the political climate.
I'm
this
sorry.
This has nothing to do to do with marches through the cities against police brutality. This has nothing to do with it. These are drunken people acting drunk.
It wasn't drunk
you don't think? Yeah, I'm not
this
sure.
is bar life. This is bar life.
It was a drunken fight that got out of control.
This is where you go to play cornhole at the beer garden. It's not like League Knot got out of control.
I don't know why you're stuck on the fact that it's at the beer garden.
I think that is. I think that type of venue is where you wouldn't expect this incident to happen.
No, you wouldn't.
Okay.
The beer garden is safe and pleasant and lovely.
Fine.
But so is Worcester. Worcester's a safe city, but you wouldn't know
always,
that.
this conversation is going to continue. You'll just pick it up next week right here, same place, same time. Thanks for being with us on this edition. I'm telling you.